We need to run us.
3 and 6 we have a run-up. I was going to let Daniel go first because I told him I thought his district would be most widely represented here, but obviously I'm wrong. Okay. Oh, I was going to let Daniel go first, Representative Kagan, because I thought his district would have the most people here. But obviously I guessed wrong. Once again, Representative Court is the overachiever.
My people, just my people.
The good news for me is 3 and 6 and 1 are all in my district, so really I'm the overachiever.
True.
What I wanted to say first of all is this nice woman here let me know that the ticketers in this neighborhood can be vicious, I'm told, but that if you go this way and to the right or left, it's 2-hour parking if you're concerned about that.
Or no limit.
Or no limit. So just, especially if any of you are at risk for getting booted, you probably should definitely move. Sure, maybe we could take a break. Someone suggested a 1-hour break and move the cars. I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want to especially thank my fellow legislators for being here. We have Senator Lucia Guzman from Senate District 34 and House District 4. Representative Lois Court from House District 6. And Representative Daniel Kagan from House District 3. And there are people here to film Senator Stedman, so he must be planning on making quite the entrance. Yeah. It will be interesting to see what he does. I wanted to go ahead and let John Barry get started with his overview. And what we wanted to do today really was give you all an idea of where the maps stand right now for reapportionment. And are you going to talk about reapportionment and why we're having it and stuff? Yeah. All right. Let you know where it stands right now, particularly because the time for public comment is going to be Wednesday night at the Capitol in the old Supreme Court chambers. Is that 7 to 9 or?
6.
6, starting at 6 p.m.
Where in the Capitol building?
In the old Supreme Court chambers, which are on the north side of the 2nd floor.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do you have the demographics and maps for HD 4 and 7? I didn't see those.
We don't have 4 and 7 here. We have stuff here for every legislator who had planned on participating. I'm not sure who asked the question. So 4 and 7 are not here. We can get them to you though if you want afterwards. Let me know.
Yeah, if you stop by and talk to Owen, he'll get that sent to you. All right, go ahead, Lois.
But before Jerry starts, I just want a round of applause for Irene and Owen, who did yeoman's work to put this together.
Oh, and Representative Beth McCann just joined us.
Hi.
Go ahead, John.
Jerry.
I'm Jeremiah Berry. I'm the staff director for the Reapportionment Commission. And I thought I would start off tonight just by talking a little bit about the Reapportionment Commission, how it's formed, why it's formed, its time frame for working, and the legal criteria that it has to follow, and then a little bit more specifically about Denver and the changes in the population in Denver versus the population of the state that has a tremendous effect on how the districts in Denver are being drawn and redrawn. Now, in most states,
Jeremiah, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt 1 second. If anybody's really anxious about parking, here are some permits that will be here at the front. You're welcome to take one out to your car at some point.
That's good for the whole night.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You know, you don't really have to do that because we haven't had a problem for 6 years. So, if you'd rather just stay in your seat, that's fine too.
You really don't need to worry about it.
Okay, I have that. I'm going to trust you.
It's really not an issue at all.
For people who aren't concerned, we're going to let John go ahead with his discussion. Sorry.
Jerry.
Jerry, I keep calling you John. I'm so sorry. Jerry.
Now, in most states, it is the General Assembly itself that redraws their own districts. but in 1974 there was a citizens initiative in Colorado that changed the process and took that power away from the General Assembly and gave it to a more independent reapportionment commission. So this commission is required by the state constitution every 10 years, basically the year following the year that the census is taken, to redraw the boundaries of the state house and senate districts. Now it's made up of 11 members. There are 4 members that are either members of leadership from the General Assembly, or they can designate someone else to serve in their place. So there are 4 from the legislative branch, a majority and a minority member from each house, so you have an even split of Republicans and Democrats from the legislature. The governor is then entitled to appoint 3 members, and finally the Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court appoints the final 4 members. There are requirements that there's a geographic spread on the membership. There has to be at least 1 from each congressional district, and there can be no more than 4 from a single congressional district. That Constitution limits the makeup so that there can only be 6 members from 1 political party. So theoretically, and 10 years ago, there was a 6-5 majority of one of the political parties. This year, the Chief Justice's last appointment was an unaffiliated. So this time, there's actually 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and he was elected chair, but the chair, who is an unaffiliated. And let's see, there has to be 1 from west of the Continental Divide. So that's the makeup of the commission. The time frame is, the Constitution says that those appointments are made between April 1st and May 5th. By May 15th, the commission must convene. We held our first meeting on May 12th. The Constitution then tells the commission that it's to adopt a preliminary plan. So the commission held 11 meetings in Denver. It divided the state into 7 different regions, asked for and received public testimony on each of the 7 regions, and finally adopted a preliminary plan. The Constitution then tells the commission to hold public hearings throughout the state on that preliminary plan. The commission scheduled 25 public hearings throughout the state between August 4th and September 1st. So we've now done 21 of the 25 public hearings. There's one in Greeley tonight, and the commission has one every night this week until Thursday. Their last meeting is in Broomfield on Thursday, and as it was mentioned, on Wednesday is the meeting in Denver in the state capitol building. Now, following that public comment hearing, the commission will come back and hold meetings in Denver in which it will ultimately adopt a final plan. Under the Constitution, that final plan is submitted to the Colorado Supreme Court. That has to happen by October 7th. People can file objections to the final plan as it's submitted. The Supreme Court will likely hold oral arguments on those objections in that plan. If the court accepts the plan as submitted by the commission and approves it, it's then filed with the Colorado Secretary of State's office, and that's the redistricting plan that will be in effect for the next 10 years. If the Supreme Court rejects it, they have to tell the commission why they're rejecting it, and it's referred back to the commission, so the commission again will have to hold meetings to adopt a new final plan that complies with the language that the Colorado Supreme Court said about its first plan. And all of this has to be finished by December 14th, giving enough time for county clerks to redraw the precincts so that you can hold precinct caucuses hopefully in March, although there's still a minor chance, at least the Republicans, there's some talk that they may hold it the first Tuesday in February. Well, that's what we did 10 years ago. Not 10 years ago, 8 years ago. 4 years ago. 4 years ago.
2 years ago. Did we do February?
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
3 years ago. Right, 3 years ago. The last presidential primary session, we moved our precinct caucuses up to February. So that's the time frame that the commission has to work with. There are legal criteria that the commission has to follow, and there's sort of an order in which they have to follow that criteria. The primary, not surprising, is the U.S. Constitution, and that's where the one person, one vote concept comes in. Next, under the 15th Amendment, you can't discriminate in the right to vote against a person for race or color or previous servitude. The federal Congress has expanded that minority issue with passage of the Voting Rights Act. So you can't adopt, a state can't adopt a process or procedure, and redistricting is considered one of those procedures that you can't adopt one that has the effect of denying a person the right to elect representatives of their choice based upon race, color, creed, or membership in a language minority. So those are the federal criteria that the commission first has to meet, and once they meet that, then they have to meet the state constitutional requirements. And the first one under the state constitutional requirements is again that one person, one vote. And under the Colorado Constitution, between the population of the largest district and the smallest district, the deviation can be no more than 5%. So what the commission does and what you do is you take the total population of the state, you divide that by 35 seats for the Senate or 65 seats for the House, and you get an ideal district size. If every district had an identical number of people in it, what would that population be? You can then go about 2.5% above that number or 2.5% below that number, and you're within that 5% range. Yes, sir?
Yes, that's population, not voters, correct?
Correct, that is population.
And is that legal or undocumented people counted?
The U.S. Census is directed to count people, and it doesn't matter whether the person is here legally or illegally. The U.S. Census is taken for population purposes. And that 5% deviation in the Colorado Constitution is actually more stringent than the U.S. Supreme Court has held under the U.S. Constitution. So by satisfying the Colorado constitutional requirement, we've satisfied the federal constitutional requirement for one person, one vote. The next criteria under the Colorado Constitution is, to the extent possible, except when necessary to make those population numbers work, you're to keep counties whole. And if it's necessary within a county to split the population of that county, you're to minimize the number of cities within that county that are split. Now remember, there was a criteria there, and the county boundaries actually have a higher priority than city boundaries. So some cities, such as Longmont, most of it's in Boulder County, but there's a portion of it that stretches over I-25 into Weld County. The city of Longmont is probably going to be split because we're going to have to maintain that county boundary before we worry about city boundaries. It isn't a problem in Denver, fortunately, but in other cities, that's a criteria that comes into play. After you satisfy the city boundaries, then the districts are to be as compact as possible. Under the Colorado Constitution, compactness is you measure the outside border of each of the districts, and you add all of those together, and hopefully that is the smallest number as possible. That's how, under the Colorado Constitution, we determine compactness. They have to be contiguous. That is, they have to be touching one another. That's why the enclaves such as Glendale, although it's part of Reapportionment County, it ends up being put in a district with Denver rather than Reapportionment County because it's not contiguous with Reapportionment County. And then finally we get down to we're to preserve communities of interest. And that's actually one of the hardest things for the commission to do, because all of these other things we can sort of figure out mathematically. What is a community of interest, and exactly what are the boundaries that you're trying to preserve? And that's one of the main reasons, I think, why the proponents of that constitutional amendment required so much public input and required the commission to take that preliminary plan around the state to hold public hearings so they could get public input and public feedback on what are those communities of interest that need to be preserved within a district. Yes, sir.
Is there any case law or legislative guidance as to what constitutes a community of interest?
The Constitution actually specifies, and I don't have it with me, ethnic, cultural, economic, and other things. And I'll give you an email address for the commission, and if you have questions about it, feel free to email me, and I'll be able to send you the exact constitutional language on that. So that's the criteria that the commission must adopt, and I apologize.
Does it mention neighborhoods?
Neighborhoods I don't think are specifically mentioned, but I mean, I think that arguably that's a community of interest, whether it's, you can argue it's cultural or it's economic, or there's a number of different things you can argue about a neighborhood being a community of interest. And I apologize, I had some great figures I was going to give you on the population of Denver and what it was under the 2000 census and what it is under the 2010 census, and I opened up my briefcase and it wasn't there. So I'll have to wing this, but one of the problems is the population of Denver between 2000 and 2010 actually grew by about 46,000 people. Unfortunately, for Denver, the state as a whole grew faster than that. So while 10 years ago, my recollection is when you took the population of Denver and divided it by that ideal district size, you got 4.51. So we drew 4 districts in Denver, and one district, Senator Stedman's district, started off in Denver and it stretched into Adams County. Well, when you do that calculation under the 2010 figures, instead of 4.5 something, we're down to 4.2 something. So instead of having half of another district that goes into another county, we're actually going to only have 20% of a district that goes into another county. And we'll see when we get the maps back up that at least under the preliminary plan in the Senate, there's a Senate district that is mostly made up of Arapahoe County that takes a little bit of the southern part of Denver south of Hampton Street. And that's how they dealt with that extra 20% population in Denver. In the House, we went from 9 districts, and actually if you look at the House plan from 10 years ago, there's some question as to whether it was actually properly done, because there are actually 2 House districts in Denver that include part of Arapahoe County. I don't think they're going to be able to get away with that this time, so we have drawn 8, and actually you can draw 8 districts wholly within Denver without having to go outside of the boundaries of Denver when you include the enclaves of Glendale and Holly Hills. So that's what the plan does. Unfortunately, what that does to Representative Kagan is moves him out of a district that has any part of Denver. So he is in a district that is entirely within Arapahoe County. But it is the changes in the population that Denver grew but didn't grow as fast as the state as a whole, and that has an impact on the number of districts that you can draw within Denver. Are there questions?
Actually, before that, I failed to introduce our clerk and recorder, Deborah Johnson. Go ahead.
Whose job it'll be to make a lot of sense out of a lot of this. Is someone going to address the problem with the caucus? Like some of us may be moved into another district before the 30-day residency requirement is met. I mean after, so we wouldn't be able to vote.
No.
Isn't that a concern?
Representative Court actually teaches civics, so it'll make her answer.
Well, as Jerry said, the timeline in the Constitution wouldn't make that happen. We've got to have the lines done prior to the caucus with enough time for people to be in their caucuses, for Deborah to figure out how to manage it on a, for the clerk and recorder's place, and for the parties to figure out how to set up all the precincts and all of that, working with Deborah. So there's,
It just felt like it was getting really.
you'll get close.
I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that.
It could be very close, but the requirements
Okay.
are that, unless we move the caucus to December, you know.
Oh, wait.